if anyone who's predicting what looks like in a year or two is going to be fundamentally wrong. And I think that's really what makes it so exciting. We don't know where we're going, other than that we do know that we're going to keep building software while maintaining billions, if not trillions of lines of code that are already out there. We go back a year into December 2024. Who would have predicted that at the end of 2025, developers are back in the terminal with Cloud Code and Gemini CLI and Codex CLI and Copilot CLI and have like 6 or 8 or whatever, a grid of terminals open and have all these agents running in parallel and trying to figure out all the work of the last 30 commits and what have you.
When I think about innovation, from incumbents on it, Copilot is actually, like GitHub Copilot is a great example of innovation that came from sort of within the company and kind of like pioneered that sort of new space of coding assistant that feels like an AI tools now, sort of, like the old pattern, but, for a while was there. And then like, even with all of its reach and all of its sort of strength, there was like the opportunity for Cursor, I guess, kind of most notably to, Copilot continued to thrive. So it wasn't really like at the expense of sort of Copilot, but from a market share perspective, kind of grow even faster, right? And sort of take up that sort of space on it. And then indeed you have the disruption coming from Anthropic, which is kind of hard to think about them. Are they a startup? Are they incumbents? Like those are very weird beasts. There's sort of the OpenAI and Anthropic that are like, especially Anthropic, like sort of a short-lived organization and a massively valued organization, but still very much a startup in many ways. And overhauls like the fundamentals of it's going to be terminal versus IDE. So I guess there's a sort of a faith or still a perspective that when you're looking to disrupt, like I believe that especially when you're disrupting the way things are done, not just automating existing workflows, but rather sort of changing the way that someone work. Those are precisely the places where it's hard for an incumbent to kind of accept it because they have all the power in the existing way of working, and so it's hard to accept that change will come, right?
I think that's kind of like the outside in perspective, and that you look at companies that have been leading for a long time and then are being disrupted or are seeing more competition, and you feel sad or worry about the people that are now kind of like in that position that they're no longer the best in the market. I think the inside out perspective is often not as dire as you may think. I've often thought when I work for Mercedes, that the best thing that can happen to us is that BMW announces a new model with a new thing in it that the Mercedes leadership didn't want to fund, and all of a sudden you have an argument to get the funding, and be able to say, okay, look, our competitors are doing this, we better wake up and also try to catch up again. And you saw in the news that Sam Altman declared a code red, and Google had a code red, and I'm sure Satya had I know Satya had a bunch of code reds over his tenure, and so competition is good. It actually makes a business and it makes life more fun, and we see that everywhere. Coming back to my Formula One example, it was Red Bull that won for 4 years, and it was Mercedes for like 8 years, and then Red Bull had another 4 years. You kind of want these changes, and it motivates those that have been winning for too long, to come back and then see how do we now transform our organization to be a winner again. And if you mentioned Cursor and VS Code, actually the IDE space has been phenomenally stable over the last decade. And like I remember when I started on a Mac, I think was 2008 or 2007. I started on TextMate, and TextMate was the revolution back then. And then as TextMate kind of like became stale, and TextMate 2 took way too long, switched to Sublime Edit, and then VS Code came, and VS Code for the last decade was the default editor or IDE for almost everybody. There's obviously some Emacs users and some Vim users and what have you. And now we have real competition again. And it's not only Cursor and VS Code with Copilot. Windsurf is obviously in the play now. Recently, Google Anti-Gravity came out. There's a Kilo Code and Kiro and Zed, and so there's a whole competition, and that means somebody sees an opportunity there to disrupt and to innovate and ultimately build a sustainable business. And I think that really is exciting and not something to worry about, both as the incumbent and as the disruptor.
No, I agree, and I'm not sort of worried about it. In fact, I like the changes. I think like a all of these require a moment of disruption that sort of, you know, makes sense. That is hard for sort of the incumbent to follow. And you're right that it's always like competition is the greatest motivator for it and the opportunity to drive.
And at GitHub, you know, it pushed us last year in 2024 to go from just having one default model in Copilot to offering multi-model choice. Where, you know, at GitHub Universe in October 2024, I announced that we now back then, you know, support Claude. What was even the version number? Claude 3, I think. And Gemini 1.5 Pro, and in the meantime, if you open Copilot, it has like a whole list of major models, and then you can bring your own model and connect Open Router and all these kind of things, right? So you can kind of see the direct impact of competition in the market leading to a better product for the incumbent as well. If you look at Microsoft, it is probably the biggest platform company that is out there. Like, it's not only Copilot and GitHub that have some form of, you know, neutrality, offering choice. It's also, if you look, for example, into Azure AI Foundry, which has like a huge range of models available. So it's not just the OpenAI and the Microsoft developed models. It's, you know, Mistral models and Black Forest Labs models and lots of open source alternatives, and you can deploy your own model, right? So in that sense, maybe the Switzerland analogy isn't as good as just saying it's a platform company, and platform companies by design want to have as many players on top of that platform, you know, which is GPU inference as an example, or you know, CPU compute or storage or what have you in Azure, because that helps both, you know, the platform provider as in Microsoft and, you know, the partners all to thrive. Right, I think that's really the leverage that Microsoft has as a business, is the scale of that platform, and that's the opportunity for every startup to become part of, you know, Microsoft Startup Program. And I should ask you, have you actually joined the Microsoft Startup Program? And are you thinking about co-sell?
We're sort of like in all the programs, right? You know, we're because they all commit until you get.
But
big.
You know, at some point, every startup gets kind of, especially every B2B startup, maybe less than B2C, but B2B, every B2B startup comes to the point where they either want to leverage Microsoft's distribution channel and an amazing enterprise sales team, or Amazon's or Google, because the scale of these sales teams around the world and their skill set is so far ahead of what a small startup can ever deliver without going through the pain of, you know, building out subsidiaries and building out local offices and local meetups, and you know, there is a lot of human investment that has to happen that you can't replace with AI, because enterprise sales fundamentally is still a, you know, relationship management exercise.